That's assault battery.
Okay, we're gonna start.
Welcome to the City Council Oversight Committee meeting for Thursday, December 11th. First on our agenda is update from City Care on the operation of the emergency shelter. And I'd like to recognize Sean.
Yes, ma'am.
To give us an update.
Sorry, I thought I was third. I'm first. Number one in your card. I can live with that.
Okay, thanks, sir. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Lloyd. I'm Senior Director of Homeless Services at City Care, and I'm here to provide an update on shelter. Yeah, I do. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the numbers around what we've seen so far in shelter, like how many nights of rest. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the patterns we've identified and some of the things that we're seeing there in shelter. And so we've provided 16,942 shelter beds since we took over on January 15th of 2025. And that's a rough average of about 51 people a day. The point in time count is a system where all the providers go out and they count how many people are experiencing homelessness on any given night, or on a certain given night in the freezing cold in January. And so it's one of the ways that HUD requires cities to get a snapshot of what homelessness looks like in the area. And so our point in time count for this year, I think, was 240. Is that right, Heidi? 240?
Yeah.
Yeah, 240 people. And we've seen 397 unique individuals in City Care since January 15. And so you can usually kind of estimate that there's more people experiencing homelessness than you're ever going to catch in a point in time count. So one of the things we wanted to implement was some housing navigation in our system. And what we noticed looking at what data we could get our hands on before we came in versus what data we've gathered is that it seemed to be a bottleneck. It seemed to be the same 50-something people kind of staying in shelter for quite a long time. And so one of the things we wanted to do was start working with people to go into housing. We implemented doing housing assessments on the people who come in. And so we've done 186 assessments so far, which is an assessment to measure like how extreme someone's experience is with homelessness. And so we've connected 24 individuals to housing so far for the year. And I believe that was 21 households and 24 individuals. So there was a couple of people that we got to join a household together and move into housing with each other. So on demographics, these are all things that are self-reported or things that we figure out as we develop relationship with the guests in shelter. And so we've had 140 people report as chronically homeless. And we use the HUD definition of that. And what that means is they've either been homeless 4 times in 3 years, totaling 12 months, or the previous 12 months straight. We've had 25 veterans. I know last time I was here, I talked about how our number of veteran count was disproportionate to the amount of people experiencing homelessness. Now that we've gotten a better picture at how many people are cycling through the shelter, it's starting to line up a little more with the rest of the nation on how many veterans. And I believe we had 6 veterans go into housing since we started working with housing. We had 368 people report mental health disorders. 154 guests with a physical disability, so that's about 39% of the guests. And 173 have experienced domestic violence. That's almost half. So almost half of everybody who walks into shelter has had some experience with domestic violence.
What's the period again? The period?
January 15th, 2025 to the end of November. Okay, race and age. There's quite a large number of white or Caucasian people in Norman experiencing homelessness, which is 253, and 57 people are African American or Black. That number is a little disproportionate to what we usually see in cities. Usually, the African American population makes up almost half of what homeless numbers are, even though they usually make up less than 16% of a population in any given city. On the age demographic, we have seen an uptick in older people experiencing homelessness. And it's not just older people experiencing homelessness, it's older people experiencing homelessness for the first time, which is something we've identified and we need to come up with solutions based around. I know that it gets a little difficult sometimes with someone who's not quite old enough for Social Security, but possibly not in condition to take care of themselves or work anymore. And we've put some concentration on building relationships to help people go into assisted living or adult care systems. Am I talking too fast?
Great.
Okay, great. All right, monthly income, fair market rent. So I think fair market rent in Norman is $900 to $990 for a one-bedroom unit. It should be about 30% of someone's income. So someone would need to bring home roughly $2,700 to about $3,000 a month to be able to afford a one-bedroom on their own. We have 60 people in shelter that receive from $500 to $1,000 a month. 26 receive $1,000 to $2,000. So they would technically have enough money to pay rent, but they wouldn't have enough money to pay for anything else in life at that rate. 12 people have $2,000 or more, which could put them in a range where they actually possibly could, and they need a boost to get into housing, or they really don't quite make enough over to afford all the things that we need to live. And we had 271 people report that they have zero income.
John, quick question on the housing.
Yes.
You guys search for the next affordable unit all over Cleveland County, is that correct?
Yes, we've had some people, we've had 2 people move to a different county altogether. But yes, we do look for available units. We also have established now some relationships with some landlords, and we've taken over a permanent supportive housing grant that's quickly allowed us to build better relationship with some of the landlords as well. And so where we've run into trouble is finding rent and deposits for people. We are now a recipient of ESG dollars, and that will allow us the ability to pay those deposits and some of that first month's rent to help people move into stable housing. We've also run into some issues with getting IDs, and so I think we talked about that last time too. But we're working on partnerships right now with a few different groups, and we've had some conversations in the very, very recent that gives us hope on finding some of those dollars to help obtain those things. We can get some of those things with ESG dollars, but it has to be the very last thing that's a barrier for someone getting housing, and we can't even get someone on the housing list unless they have those things in place. And so we get kind of caught in this circle where if we don't have those things, we can't even get you on the wait list, but we can't get those things for you unless you're on the wait list. Where is the income coming from? So we've got 51 guests whose income is coming from Social Security disability, 47 who are receiving Social Security, and 21 people who haven't earned income. So that means they're employed and working. We've got 6 people that have retirement from SSI and 1 person who lives off a pension from work. Also, nobody hesitate to stop me if I'm going and you have questions. One of the things we want to concentrate on is medical care. And so everybody who comes in, we know a few things. We know if we can secure at least normal, proper medical care for someone, it usually takes less expense off the city because that's less ambulance calls, that's less walk-in visits to ERs, and that's less services for people experiencing homelessness that have to be provided by some kind of medical system. So we've had 154 guests come in who are uninsured altogether, and 211 have state-sponsored or Medicaid, which technically in Oklahoma, it's the same thing. Medicaid is the state-sponsored. 61 people have Medicare, so that's about 15% of the population that we've seen. Yes, ma'am.
So when we were talking about veterans, did they have any veterans benefits or access to the VA healthcare system?
Yes, that's a good question. So the individuals who came in weren't connected with VA services. So we do have a relationship with a statewide VA service that comes in to shelter and meets with people, and they have been able to pull DD 216s. Did I say that right? 214s. I knew you would know. Yeah. Golly, I practiced that twice today. Yeah. So we were able to get them connected to those health cares fairly quickly, and we were able to get them connected to like HUD-VASH and some of the programs that are made specifically for veterans experiencing homelessness. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, because I was just curious if what number of them could be without healthcare or access to it, given their status.
Yeah, so that's the tough part is we can connect them to the service, but I don't know, short of just asking outside of that, and there's not a way for me to capture that in regular data systems, but that is something we could possibly track outside of our HMIS system.
Yeah.
If they obtain healthcare. That's a pretty good question. I'm gonna talk to Keith and see if we can put something together in HMIS to where we could track if they obtain healthcare while there or.
Right. Well, and I was also thinking about the mental health care aspect of it all, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So there was an interesting stat that I noticed in that our native or indigenous population in Norman is a higher concentration of people accessing shelter than it is in most of the cities in the country. And I thought that was quite interesting. 23 of our guests identified as native or indigenous, and only 6 of them had native health care. So that's what 26% of all the native guests aren't accessing native health care. And I found that quite interesting, kind of like the veterans.
Yeah, and so do they, or do you have a connect into native healthcare services throughout the state to, if somebody's tribe is able to cover them?
That's a great question. And so what we've had to do is we've had to help them get in touch with the tribe that they're registered with or on the rolls with. So that's not something I can just make a quick connection for, but what we can do is set them down with a navigator or a case manager who can help them get into contact with that tribe to access those cares.
And just out of curiosity, veteran, native, whoever, how long does it usually take someone to get signed up and actually have access to healthcare? Is this like a 1, 2, 3 month process? Or I see Heidi.
Can I help answer a couple of these questions?
Yeah.
Specifically for indigenous people, the absentee Shawnee tribe will help anybody. Like if you are indigenous, they will help you. So if we can get a case manager to connect them, and the same with the VA, SSVF, VASH, the people that are not accessing it, it's not that the resource is not there. Those are the very two populations that if they're not receiving services, it's because they are either unwilling or unable to connect with the services in a way that the services work.
Or
We
the
have a couple-
services are off limits to them.
Yeah, or they were dishonorably discharged. There's something that prevents them from, they have access services before and did something that prevents them from receiving services, but we are not like other big counties where you have huge veteran populations that they don't have the resources. If someone is a veteran in Norman, America, there are services for them if they can cooperate in the system enough to access it.
So is
If they're eligible, we have a lot of people who say, oh yeah, I'm a veteran, and then you can't find any record of them ever having served. So if it's somebody who is eligible for benefits, we get them hooked up as quickly as we can, but they have to be willing to return a phone call.
So it's really unique to the individual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have somebody who comes in weekly to work with veterans.
We have, Mike Primo came back. He was here before and had gone, and he's come back, and he'll drive anywhere. He'll go to any encampment as long as he can just get someone to engage with him. And there's a couple people like that. It's just a matter of meeting the person where they are in a way that they can engage if they're able to.
Primo's an expert as well. He's really good.
They've come out twice this year too and done specific targeted in Norman, like,
encampments?
yes, like anybody who is medical care and all that, they'll,
So kind of like a street outreach team?
They actually organize it statewide, and they call it like I don't remember what they called it, but like.
Stand down?
Yeah, where they have specific days where everybody goes out from the offices, all the service providers are out in encampments on specific days, going to the food and shelter parking lot, going to the CCFI park, like, they're there making sure that they are as visible as possible to sign up as many people as they can.
Is that monthly or quarterly or?
It's usually been,
they've done it twice this year.
Yeah,
that I
they
remember.
had to stand down from providing services for a couple months this year because of some things that happened at the federal level. But there is access to a case manager through a phone number anytime.
And walk-in services as well.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you all.
Thanks, Heidi.
You're welcome.
It's always good to have Heidi here. So last time we were here, you guys had requested just some baseline numbers and data on people coming in. And so in that, we pulled 69 people over right at about a month, which is not a large target group, but we could only work with who was coming in. And so some of the questions were, what state are people coming from? What county? Are they surrounding cities or counties? And so some of that data was interesting. And Oklahoma, 55 of the residents or people who came in have been residents of Oklahoma most of their lives. We had one person from Arkansas and 13 from other. And what other stood for was someone who was not from the surrounding state to the state of Oklahoma. By county and city, we had, I made a mistake right there. We had 42 of the 69 people lived in Cleveland County before they were experiencing homelessness, and 16 were from Oklahoma City, and those were the two largest draws. There was like 2 from Pottawatomie County, and 65 plus shouldn't be on that graph at all. The last city they lived in, 35 of those people started experiencing homelessness from the city of Norman. And so they were residents of Norman before they went into homelessness. 14 of them were from Oklahoma City, 3 from Moore, 2 from Shawnee.
What counts as a resident of Norman? What's that definition?
That definition would be someone who was leased into a property in Norman when they became homeless. Or, you know what, I might have said that wrong. Maybe they weren't leased in. Maybe they lived with their mom or their brother or.
Yeah, I would say too, I've known of
They just have
situations
residence.
where people came
Right.
here for work and when they got here, that work was not actually a job that they could work, so
Yeah.
then they're stuck here.
That's
Or they
right.
came to school at OU.
Yeah.
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 That's another one.
Okay, residential data, so that would be point of entry, that would be, where somebody stayed previous to coming into shelter with us. And so 24 people were unhoused, so they were street homeless whenever they came into shelter. 16 reported that they were housed before they stepped into shelter that day. 13 said they came from another shelter system before they came into shelter with us at City Care. 2 people came from the county jail, and the hospital was 1 person. I didn't think the hospital report was actually accurate because I know we have more people who come in from hospital. Where it gets a little weird on that number is a lot of times they went into hospital from shelter, and so they technically came from shelter before going into shelter. And 13 people refused to answer.
I would like to ask about shelters, so that could be Salvation Army. Is that really all we have besides like city, what we're doing?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, they could have came from food and shelter during the day, which technically is considered shelter, but it's not overnight. So, yeah.
Why would people do that? Why would they go from one shelter to time period?
Some shelters do have restrictions, so you could, they might have a 2-month stay time where at the end of 2 months, you have to leave regardless if you're going into housing or not. And so they would need to find another shelter to go in because they haven't quite reached a place where they could move into housing in that 2-month period.
Salvation Army isn't 2 months, it's
30 days.
30 days. They just increased it this year from 30 days.
Yeah.
I think it's 120 days. I think it's 60 days, and there's a, they apply again. If they're accepted, they can go 120 days. They have to make progress, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
What is this?
Salvation Army.
And that tracks with,
Yeah, they've changed they've been stepping their Norman so that it comes directly in line with what they do in Oklahoma City. And it's been so long since I've looked at it, I couldn't tell you what it was. I would trust that. As long as they are making progress. Now, if somebody's there and not making progress, it's significantly less than that amount of time. It's usually 14 to 21 days.
Mayor Holman?
I might have missed it. Did you say the stat is just November, or what's the time frame?
The time frame is,
3 months, or what is it?
no, it's about a month. It's right at a month, yeah. And it was mostly October.
October, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And we'll get this residential data quarterly moving forward.
No, this was a survey. This was data that was ran on a survey outside of our regular data.
Yeah, we were curious about the jail one just because of the county taking on extra folks and how people are released from jail.
Yeah, so there's a possibility that some of the refused came from jail, but I can't guarantee that either way. But we only had 2 people who reported that they discharged from jail that day.
And did they walk all the way down into Central Norman?
I don't have that answer.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, but I don't have the answer.
All right, appreciate it.
Sorry about that. So case management, housing navigation, this is some of our advocacy points by type. And so advocacy could look like a phone call, it could look like giving someone a ride, it could look like going online and signing them up for some kind of service. And so you guys have a copy of this in the slideshow. You can look at it if you're interested in indirect numbers, but for sake of time, I won't talk through every single one. I will say that we've provided a lot of service towards housing and towards identification and documentation. And those are the 2 things that we have the most restrictions on right now achieving. And so the hope is that we can continue to put some things in place to where when we're making those advocacy points, we're finding success. By service type, so this is referrals made. So this isn't just a case manager helping somebody through a process. This is actually a direct referral that's made for a service. And so we've had 92 housing referrals, 18 medical service, 36 people have been referred directly to mental health, 26 have been referred to shelter. And so what that actually was somebody being referred to like food and shelter for meals or some kind of daytime operation, and 121 different social services. So that could be mental health, that could be SNAP benefits, it could be anything that's based off social services. And we've transferred 4 people to substance abuse treatment.
Councilmember Bruce.
Can we go back to, so I just want
Sure.
to try to understand the state.
Sure.
So these counts, there were a period of time, it was from January to,
Yes.
so I'm looking at the numbers.
It technically wasn't from January, it was technically from April for these numbers, because we had to get HMIS set up in a way for us to be able to track this. So when we came in, the system wasn't being utilized to its full capabilities. And that was one of the things that we had to do and get in place, was a way to make these referrals, to make these advocacy points and track them in the data system.
So in my mind, you have 50, average of 51 a night, 52 a night. I'm thinking, okay, these are probably multiple reference, are these multiple one to many? One to many is the relationship, one individual, we refer to multiple times.
That could be, yes.
Okay, or is this, or you only count that individual one time, no matter how many times you refer?
No, that's
Does
not.
that make sense?
It does make sense. No, so the answer to that is one unique individual could receive multiple referrals.
How about, can I have multiple referrals, just one individual in housing, and you count that person one time
No.
or multiple times?
No, we would only have one count for someone being referred to a housing option. Yeah. Yeah, there are, so one person could receive housing referrals and that same person could also receive mental health referrals, but we won't count the same person 4 times for housing.
Right, and so that's a perfect example, and it's like, man, you put a lot of resources, one guy, you only count him once, you only have 92 hits, but if you really count by event, you might have 500 in that column.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because one person would receive housing referrals, but what would happen is they would be with a housing navigator, and that navigator would go in and mark that I've made housing referrals, but they're really referring to 10 places. You know, not necessarily 10 to be exact, but they're referring to multiple places. Does that make sense? Kinda? Okay. These are some of the places where we've made those direct referrals. And so that was one thing we talked about before, was us putting together a system to where we have a way to tell where we're making the most referrals to and who they are. And so obviously DHS is high because that's SNAP benefits and some of the things we need. The Norman Mental Health is someone we use regularly, and we've made 42 referrals to them to date. And food and shelter, we've made 25. And so that would be like food and some of the things they need to work during the day and possible case management.
When we were talking about how you're limited on getting people IDs and all that, is some of that work happening at food and shelter during the day when people have that capacity to work on that process?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't know what funds they have access to or don't have access to, but I do know that they do directly help people obtain some of those items as well. And also, if you were going into housing per se at food and shelter, you would have to have those items also. So they do provide some case management.
Is City Care struggling on the IDs and all that because of funding?
Part of it is funding, yes, for obtaining those items. We've got dollars in place that we could use to get those things, but they're restricted funds. And so we're running into that situation where we can't spend them. But we've also had a few partnerships with some of the religious community that has provided some funds to obtain those things. And we're currently working on partnerships now with other groups as well to maintain that.
So next quarter, we could see a few more people get their IDs and be able to get into that, on that wait list.
That's right. Yeah, and so from that wait list, I don't know if I think I got a slide in here on some of the housing stuff in a minute, but the wait list for Norman is actually opened back up. And so I think we've housed 3 people with vouchers now from that wait list, but they were previously on that wait list before City Care was ever in Norman.
Okay, so it's been over a year.
Yes,
Almost.
The list was closed for 18 months.
that's right.
Yeah, I remember there was like funding issues.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bruce?
So this is really educational. So when I think case management, I think, there's a file, electronic case management.
Yes.
Hey, this is what we're doing, and is that in some like HMMS? system?
HMIS, it's Homeless Management Information System.
So it has stuff related to referrals, history of referrals.
Yes.
And then everyone on the continuum of care has access to that case file.
That's a great question. So that's something we're moving towards here. I don't think there's a huge utilization of HMIS currently.
The only people who currently use HMIS are people who receive funding, either ESG or COC dollars, and Bridges recently, like this year, has decided they will start entering in HMIS. So that is 5 of 20 agencies that use HMIS.
When you say funding, are you talking federal, state, or municipality? Or all?
ESG is pass-through funding. It passes through, for our continuum, it passes through ODOC. It's by continuum. And then PSH funding is also HUD funding that is distributed by the continuum of care.
Yeah. So it's federal with local pass-through. Anybody who we made less than 5 referrals to, I didn't mention. McFarland is one of those religious organizations that's helped us with IDs and some of those items. And 14 people have been referred to Veteran Affairs for some of those things, and then 13 have gone directly from SSVF into housing navigation and case management with them. Oh, that's it. Oh, sorry.
Sean and I speak a language called hoodies.
I'm
So
so
we,
sorry.
these acronyms mean a whole lot to us. We sometimes get to talking and forget that they don't mean anything to you. So SSVS is Social Services for Veterans Families. PSH is Permanent Supportive Housing. HMIS is our database. So
That's right.
if that happens, just flag us down. We're happy to explain.
So let me finish, and then Heidi will explain every acronym that I said.
Councilmember Dixon?
I know, I think it was maybe our last time you were here, we talked about Rotary doing kind of ID expos. Are you guys partnered with them?
That is such a good question. I had the most amazing conversation this morning on trying to bridge that gap to get us in to talk to those groups. And so it hasn't happened yet, but I believe they're on board, and I think that we can make that happen.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none.
That's it. It must have been enough information if I got no more questions.
It was nice to have the information too. It's very helpful.
Well, if anybody wants information, just email me or call me. I've got all kinds of random data points. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay, item 2, update from the Homeless Coalition on the Home-Based Action Plan.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Recognize Lee Holder present.
Well, hello to everybody who's here today. We're happy to see all of you. And I just wanted to say thank you for your time today. So Councilmember Grant, Mayor Holman, council members, I'm Lee Hall, former Ward 4 council member from 2019 to 2022. And during my time on city council, I was an active participant in the ad hoc committee to address homelessness that was created by former Mayor Bria Clark with the immediate task at the time, and remember this was 2019, to find a solution to locate and fund a temporary emergency night shelter for the winter months of 2019, because no other entity was able to make that happen that year. My commitment to finding solutions to address the complex issue of homelessness has remained steadfast since then. Today, I'm here with Heidi Smith to present the work of the Homeless Coalition. In September of 2024, Heidi and I created the Homeless Coalition with the purpose of reviewing, updating, and annotating Bridging the Gap, Action Steps to End Homelessness, commonly referred to as the Home-Based Action and Implementation Plan, that was presented to the City Council in February of 2022. This plan was created from the information gathered from the Homelessness Gaps Analysis that was presented and funded by the City Council in September of 2021. The Homeless Coalition consisted of 14 members representing the diverse interests of our community, and I'd like to take a moment just to recognize and publicly thank the members of our working group for volunteering their time and for the robust discussion over 12 meetings that has led to the report that we're giving to you today. That's Rachel Freeman and Sean Lloyd from City Care, Kara Fritz from the Central Oklahoma Community Mental Health Center, Scott Martin, Norman Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Scott. Richard McCowan, Chair of the AIM Norman Housing Strategy Plan, Lieutenant Lee McWhorter of the Norman Police Department, Scott Meyer with McFarland Methodist Church that Sean just referenced the work that they do, Darrell Sanders, who was responsible for veteran and community resources at Oklahoma Complete Health, Mayor Stephen Tyler Holman, Shannon Stevenson, Anthony Purinton, and Lisa Craig, all with the city of Norman. And 2 of our members have also experienced homelessness themselves. In addition to reviewing and updating each of the 47 action steps, the members also identified the highest priorities of the Homeless Coalition, and I just passed out a handout that shows those highest priorities in rank order as determined by the coalition. Those 6 action steps are highlighted also in the document that's attached to your agenda that Heidi will talk about a little bit more. Establishing one permanent year-round shelter with day and night services was unanimously identified by members of the coalition as the highest priority. So I would like to take a moment to congratulate each one of you and the city staff in your successful acquisition of property for the location of a permanent shelter. This really is a moment to celebrate a community working together to achieve a common goal. So we all appreciate your relentless efforts to try to get that over the finish line. So thank you for that. The task of the coalition was to present a holistic picture of the work that is currently being done and identify gaps in service that remain to be addressed. Although the goals, strategies, and action steps contained in the study created a specific roadmap and timeline for the council and the community to utilize, it should be considered complementary to other action steps that may have been taken by other community stakeholders. It really is a village when we're addressing issues like this. The needs of our community we know are not static and will necessarily change over time. Some of the steps that were identified in the 2022 study may not be as relevant in 2025. Similarly, the needs of the community have evolved in such a way that would call for additional action not contemplated in the original study. The coalition addressed all of this by reprioritizing multiple action steps while continuing to support 40 of them that continue to provide a valuable roadmap going forward for the city council and those who would provide direct services to our unhoused neighbors. While the work of our homeless coalition has come to an end, the other goal of our working group was to explore building a larger entity representing all sectors of our community to continue to collaborate with the city council, the city of Norman, and other community stakeholders to provide coordination and collaboration to continue to fill in the gaps in service similar to the model of the Homeless Alliance in Oklahoma City. To that end, some of our members of the coalition have transitioned to a new coordinating team chaired by Dan Strawn, retired director of the Oklahoma City Homeless Alliance. So I am excited to tell you today that Home Together Norman was created to focus on meeting the unique needs of Norman and capturing the positive momentum of recent community conversations, as well as to support the leadership of the city council in addressing the needs of our most vulnerable in our city. So our mission at Home Together Norman going forward is, together we will make Norman a community where everyone has a place to call home. So now I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Smith for a chance to highlight some of our findings.
Hi, everybody. I'm pretty sure I know everybody here. Everybody has been to Clubhouse and come and had lunch with me, or everybody except one person whose initials are Scott Dixon. But that's all right.
You can use my slides.
I can use his slides. That's fine. I trust his slides. Yeah. I can double click. All right. Yay. I don't have a lot of slides. I believe everybody was sent this update document, so I'm just gonna leave a lot of time for you guys to ask questions because this is way too much information to cover in 10 minutes. But if you want to look at the handout that Lee gave, these are the 6 priorities that were recognized. The highest priority, of course, is a permanent shelter. We know that's something that's been lacking in our community. And we honestly, as a group, didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about that because it's kind of the most obvious one and the one that everybody is putting the most work towards. These are in order of priority on the list that Lee provided. So 2.2A, let me go back just a little bit. So the home-based action plan gave a series of steps that said this is important in our community. Some of them were really accurate and some of them were a little more generic. Some of them, the more generic ones, were really not applicable to our community because of the size we are. Things that the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles can do, we can't even come close to touching, but that's the difference between having a population of between 200 and 300 people experiencing homelessness and 60,000 people experiencing homelessness. We are also in a really unique place in Oklahoma in that we are not urban, so we're not Tulsa, we're not Oklahoma City. They have vastly more resources than we do. One of the things in talking with Sean and Key to Home and things like that is they have a diversion process before they do an assessment, and we do not have the resources to do diversion here because honestly, the only people we can divert before getting an assessment here are veterans, and we can send them to veteran services because there are resources for that. Or if somebody is experiencing domestic violence, they would be diverted to Women's Resource Center because we don't want them put in national databases. They have very different stipulations around the information that is taken from victims who are actively fleeing domestic violence. So, but we're not rural either, and rural has its own set of problems. I like to call Norman the biggest small town in America. It feels pretty, hometownsy, small, but it's not. We are an actual full-fledged city with city issues. So we're in the unfortunate position of not getting funding at levels that make resources available for things like identification. When City Care first came, they were like, well, how do you get identifications? And we're like, well, you work the systems that you have because we don't have an organization whose specific model is to do identification, and things that we had done in the past, like the identification fairs through the Sheriff's Department and the Norman Police Department. After COVID, they don't issue IDs that way anymore, so you can no longer use systems that used to work because of how the state and federal systems work. So you run into these roadblocks. So permanent shelter, the first one. The second, create a coordinated citywide street and encampment outreach team that includes staff from a mix of different disciplines, including street medicine, social work, nursing, behavioral health, and housing navigation. We currently have Kara Fritz, who does outreach. She works at Central Oklahoma Community Mental Health Center. Lee McWhorter by default, because when somebody calls, he has to go out there. He's doing outreach. He will take care with him. We do not have any major organization, major nonprofit that is working in Norman who has a full-fledged outreach team. COCMHC has one person, other people go out with Kara occasionally. We know that is a gap in our community. Second one, prioritize the development of single-room occupancy buildings. So that's an SRO. We have money to do that. It took 3 years to be able to purchase a property. We finally were able to do that. Yay! I will tell you, I work at Thunderbird Clubhouse. The place where I sit the majority of the time, it is literally outside my window. So Thunderbird Clubhouse has been trying for 10 years to buy that property because we wanted to do housing or something with it. And I don't know what God's Anthony Puritan prays to. Something happened and that property came through, and then the shelter property came through. And yeah, I will tell you this. I feel like that we are at a tipping point in our community for about the last 9 months, and it feels like we're actually going to make forward momentum, and we've seen 2 huge steps in forward momentum, and that brings a lot of hope. And I got to tell you, from somebody who works getting money from the federal government, we need a lot of hope. The next one is expand the highly successful coordinated efforts to assist people experiencing homelessness to obtain identification documents and connect them to public benefits. That's supportive housing, that's case management, that's some of what City Care is doing. We need more case managers to do that. Undertake a community-wide engagement campaign that includes landlords, people recently housed, the business community, and other leaders to dispel common myths about homelessness and celebrate progress of the community's efforts to reduce and end homelessness. That's a huge thing. One of my absolute favorite things to hear is nobody just does anything about homelessness in Norman. And I'm like, well, there's this collaboration of agencies who have been doing this work for about 30 years. So we understand, and I understand, that people just don't know. They don't know what homelessness really looks like. They don't know what the face of homelessness is. They don't understand that a huge portion of the work in homelessness services is prevention. It's the people that you don't see that are not hitting the streets where a huge percentage of the dollars and the resources are going. One of the things that we're starting to experience, like Sean was saying, is people, because of housing affordability, inflation, stagnated income, are being displaced. And that's when you're having people who are in their 50s and 60s and experiencing homelessness for the first time. That has been a very invisible problem that is about to become more and more visible as the federal resources begin to plateau or be cut. You're going to see more people that have used prevention services that are going to become street homeless. Hopefully not, but if the trends continue the way we are, that's what you're going to see. That education campaign, a huge portion of Home Together Norman, my personal challenge for 2026 is to see how many people, if what happens and there is a bond issue around anything for funding for the shelter, however that plays out, I'm gonna see if I can get 500 people out knocking door. I mean, like, I have in my head a number and I'm like, how many people can I get out knocking doors so that we don't get defeated by less than a percentage point this time? How many people can we get out and say, okay, people have been talking about homelessness in Norman for a long time. How do we make this a reality for the people in our community that are vulnerable? So all y'all will be getting emails from me. I'm gonna expect all y'all to be knocking doors. Everybody I've ever met is gonna knock a door. So that is one of the true emphasis of the education campaign coming in 2026 from Home Together Norman, is how can we make sure that we take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to our community. And that there really is things going on. There really are people that are out here doing it, and it's not that nobody cares, it's not that nobody's doing anything, it's a resource issue. Provide additional supports to participants who exit shelters to permanent housing through proactive case management and best practice strategies. Once again, that is more case managers. This idea that somebody gets a house, this idea that somebody's just given a house, and then all of a sudden everything's peachy, that is not how this system works. Permanent supportive housing works on the basis of, I understand that if you've been living outside for 3.5 years, when I put you in an apartment, you might have some adjustments to do and you might need some help with that. And this idea, prevention is for those people who are a paycheck away from homelessness, who a flat tire or 5 days off work caused them to not be able to pay their rent and then they got evicted. Or in November, they didn't get all their SNAP benefits, and $300 in SNAP benefits didn't come in, and they had to choose between paying their rent or feeding their children, and they chose to feed their children, so now eviction is coming. That's what prevention dollars do. But if it's somebody who has a chronic mental health issue, has chronic homelessness, these are people that are going to need wraparound services and support well after they get into a unit. One of the other big things that's not necessarily addressed here is affordable housing will be something that we are helping Home Norman, I just forgot somebody tell me what the name is again. Together, yeah. I can't remember that, I don't know why. I look at it like 3 times a week and it still won't stay.
Well, I was gonna say in that, was it 19-page action step? We're talking about an affordable housing and study and strategy, and our pro-housing grant is gonna help us with that.
Yes.
So that is coming.
I tell everybody, housing and homelessness are not the same thing, but they're like cousins. You cannot house somebody if you don't have affordable housing. And when you're in an affordable housing crisis, your low-income affordable housing crisis is significantly worse than that. If somebody doesn't have an income and they can be put on a permanent supportive housing grant, you have to find someplace that's all bills paid, which almost doesn't exist anymore. Because if they're in an apartment, but their electricity gets turned off, they're no longer considered housed because that is under the HUD definition. You can't pay for it because it's not fit for human habitation because they don't have utilities. So it's just these cycles of things. But if any of you know of any apartments for around $800 that are all bills paid in Norman that would like to house somebody who's been evicted a couple times, please call Thunderbird Clubhouse and let me know, because we have about 8 people we could put in there right now. And it's those are the barriers that become the biggest issues.
I also had made a note about landlord mitigation fund, which I did not write down which of the action steps that was, but it was basically further action needed. I guess City Care had talked about developing relationships with landlords. Is that something that is a barrier to accepting Section 8 or vouchers?
Yes, it is sometimes definitely a barrier. Some people won't take Section 8 vouchers at all. And sometimes the reason for that is because if you're gonna take a voucher, you have to pass a pretty rigorous inspection. And quite frankly, some places can't pass those inspections for the amount of dollars they're asking for in rent. The places that will take those inspections though are usually top-notch, usually pretty decent places.
And the landlord mitigation fund is something that's been bounced around for several years. It's a great idea. One of the, permanent supportive housing grants is an actual lease grant, which is a form of that. So you're leasing actually from an agency or a nonprofit, and then they sublet to other people. And that helps because the landlord knows they're gonna be able to come, and part of that grant helps pay for repairs if somebody damages the leased unit.
It's also easier to get some of those people to engage if you have proof that the client has case management. And if they're coordinating with case management instead of just a client, a lot of times people are way more apt to say yes.
To being a Section 8.
Yeah.
And if they know that the check is coming from Thunderbird Clubhouse by the first of the month every month, that is also a huge benefit.
So assurances.
Right.
Mayor Holman?
Yeah, assume that there was not a single private property owner in Norman that was willing to rent their houses out and accept vouchers. And we only were relying on Crimson Flats or McKinsey Gardens or whatever. Just at the top of anybody's head, do you know how many units we have in Norman that are
just
state
public
or
housing?
public housing?
Not very
Got a
many.
couple-
Rose Rock, and I can't tell you how many units are in them. I can find out and send it to you. But Rose Rock, McKinsey Gardens,
The one
You have
on
to be a
Rock
certain
Creek
age
and
for both
yeah,
those though.
and those have,
minimum age.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a minimum age is like 65. or
Okay.
yeah, for Rose Rock. And McKinsey Gardens, I know you have to have a mental illness.
Okay.
And then there's less than 2 other properties, but I would say the whole number of units, if it's 200, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if there's over 200 public housing units. It's gonna be somewhere right in that.
Yeah.
And Rose Rock Rose Rock has a lot of units in it,
And
but
that's
it's for seniors.
part of why we pursued the Crimson Flats part was so we could have a guaranteed place for 40 years, I think was the agreement that we'd be able to accept. But one of the things I've observed though is a lot of the, at least in my personal experience, a lot of the property owners in Norman and maybe other places that have properties that they're willing to do that for tend to be older, sometimes much older than the average population. And I don't see a lot of people in my generation buying houses to use them for that purpose. I see them getting bought to be flipped, and how much can we get out of this thing is what I mostly see happening. So, and then from some of those older property owners that do still rent their houses out for vouchers, they say, well, concerning about how long I want to keep doing this because I'm getting older and I can't keep taking care of these places, or if there's holes in the wall and I can't just keep doing it, or I can't afford to, or whatever it may be. And so they've asked about, some sort of funding source or insurance program where if they sign up, something gets broken by the tenant, then they're covered and they don't have to take out of pocket to make the repair. So I've heard that kind of feedback, but that's been one of the big concerns of mine, is that traditionally, the type of property owners that allow their properties to be used for that are passing away, and their kids aren't seemingly carrying on that torch with those properties. And if we aren't building something like Crimson Flats, then there isn't very much. Even if somebody has a voucher, where are they gonna go use the voucher?
I will say one of the most effective programs that has happened since COVID with some of the COVID dollars is the housing navigator that works for Norman Housing Authority. Mike, what's Mike's last name?
Hillary?
He goes out and talks to landlords. He's not finding units for people. He's actually going out and engaging with landlords and asking them if they would be willing to cooperate in the Section 8 program. And while there are less properties that do that than when he started, there are like 50% more units. So he went from like 1,000 units that would take Section 8 to 2,000 units. And he continues to maintain those relationship with those landlords and to increase the number of units that will take Section 8 vouchers. And quite honestly, that is the key to getting from stepping out of homeless, specifically chronic homelessness, is a Section 8 voucher. People aren't going from chronically homeless to self-sustaining. That's not the step that happens. They go from chronically homeless to a permanent supportive housing environment, and then after 2 to 3 years, hopefully, to a Section 8 voucher. They're going to continue to be on some kind of supportive service.
Since we are seeing seniors in that demographic, first-time homelessness, is that Section 8 like applicable to them?
It will be. They can get on Section 8 usually, especially since they usually have Social Security or some kind of income. The problem becomes Section 8 waiting lists were closed for 18 months. And when they opened it back up 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, their waiting list was like 3 to 6 months. And they were issuing a small number of vouchers. I will be shocked if by the end of January, if the list isn't back up to 24 months. You're gonna be at 18, 24, 36 month wait list again.
And it started from when they turned it off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it wasn't, those are people who have been waiting that long time.
Yeah.
to even get on the list.
Yeah. So we had over 18 months where people couldn't even get on the list. So we are seeing a very small wait list right now, but that as soon as those people who haven't been able to get on for 18 months find out that they can start applying again, that list is going to
grow.
Yeah.
And then also in the action plan, 19 pages, I saw outreach team and mental health outreach, which we have been talking about our opioid abatement funds to potentially hire a case manager who would go out, and then also a community resilience manager who would help coordinate on the city end.
I am all for any other people that can help do this work.
And an intern.
Yeah. So I have heard about that and I've had a couple conversations about that. My one concern with that is I love more case management, but until we have the resources that those case managers can use, that still becomes a stumbling block to actually getting people off the street.
And then I saw Councilmember Bruce.
Thank you. So, you know, when I look at this from my framework, I see 24, 26 MPAs, and they all do certain functions, and some of them swim in the same swim lane because they do those same functions. And I look at demand across each one of those functions, and I think, well, there's got to be a central entity that helps facilitate that, manage that for awareness. I understand that's the continuum of care and I assume all MPAs, almost all, are probably part of that continuum of care. Some elect not to for some reason.
Right. The caveat I would give is functionally I am the COC, and this is my second job. So I still have my other full-time job at Thunderbird Clubhouse. So the capacity is not where it would be for most communities, and it's a collaboration of volunteers. Unless they're receiving funding, I can't ask them, I can ask everybody to do anything, but I cannot mandate that anybody do anything. Like I can mandate if you get COC funds, you have to enter an HMIS. But if you're not funded, then I can request it, but that's a pretty heavy ask.
I understand that it is a secondary, tertiary responsibility, and it's a massive responsibility, no doubt about that. So I think of things through, how do you make this easier through software and using the cloud about, this is my swim lane, this is what I specialize in, and I have a swim lane with several other partners, and I only can provide so much to the table. This is my capacity, and then this is where I'm at real time, any given time with that capacity. My partners know that too through reaching up to that cloud-based system through the web, saying, hey, I got room, send them my way. So it's very efficient. Then over time you really know, hey, I have too much capacity, or I have too little. Does Oklahoma City have something like that?
HMIS is,
I know that doesn't do it. That doesn't do it.
and I'm not convinced there's a separate system. Their continuum of care may be more robust, more staffing, where somebody could track and kind of play that traffic.
Well, no one's tracking besides the MPH, feeding information about the capacity, and this is where I'm at.
There are softwares that do that. I do not think Oklahoma City has one.
There are a few that are they don't function really well, but they're loosely kind of spreading out. But what we do have in Oklahoma City with our HMIS system is we have automated systems. And so when somebody makes that referral to housing or to one of the units, all of our available units in the city are on one unified list. And that referral, after they do what we call, it's a chat here. I gotta remember so many assessments. And OCSI in Oklahoma City, which is the same assessment essentially that we do here, that automatically puts them on a by name list. And that by name list automatically distributes those referrals to the open units. And so that's kind of how we keep up with that same system, is we have automated systems that plug people to those services.
Well, I would think this would be a good area to explore, out using the web through MPAs to understand capacity and where I'm at this point in time. So it's a real-time system. And to me, it's not, I put these systems together all the time in the government related to, hey, where I'm related to contracts across multiple entities that specialize in multiple different things. So it leads me up to the other question. I understand there's a whole spectrum of housing issues, whole spectrum, depending on where we're at in that spectrum. For example, at this point, on the need for a permanent shelter, how do we know that, hey, there's really a capacity issue per permanent shelter? At this time, we know that. But how do we know there's could be a capacity issue based upon anticipated increase in capacity with your other MPAs?
I would say the way that I know that now is I'm starting to see numbers. The prior runner of the overnight shelter, the data was not great. So I am starting to see numbers come out of city care. So I know Gary Schmidt over at Norman Police Department from a previous job, and he does their data, and he was like, 600 people a year are experiencing homelessness in Norman. And I'm like, you're not right. And this is a data guy. And he's like, no, I have the data. And I'm like, I don't have any other data points that could lead me to that. And all of a sudden City Care comes in and they're starting to do chat assessments, and I can trust their HMIS data. And it's not that we have 80 people that have stayed in shelter in a year, it's 397. And you still have a quarter left, which means that yes, by the time you count transients and everything, you're looking at, 600 is a reasonable number. And we know capacity, we know that there are people that are not staying in shelter who probably would if they had a place where they felt safe, just from point in time counts and talking with other providers. We understand the capacity that there are people who want to be in shelter now that did not feel safe to do that. And as that gets safer, that number our capacity doesn't grow to allow them. And then inclement weather also is a huge deal.
I would say, or have room. You've got couples who won't stay without their partner, and then you've got people with dogs.
Pets.
What I'm trying to say is that down at the first entry into I'm homeless, where I need shelter, I need emergency shelter, or I need temp shelter. You know, right now we have a capacity of 50, of city shelter. How do you know that there's other MPAs that are in the continuum of care, that their capacity is this at this point in time, and it's this 6 months from now, a year from now? How do you know?
How do I know what their capacity will?
I mean, is there any document or is,
Well, from a shelter standpoint, there are only 2 providers. So it's either City Care or Salvation Army that are providing overnight services. So Salvation Army has a plan that they've had some trouble getting off the ground as far as being able to provide more beds. City Care, in conjunction with the city of Norman, has a plan to provide more beds, but
Salvation Army here?
No.
Yes.
no, they're here in Norman, they're not
Yeah,
here in the
yeah,
room.
yeah, no, they're just in Norman. That's not in the room.
Yeah,
Were
we
they
can
invited?
have them back to present their master plan
They
another time.
always are.
Yeah, just a couple phone calls.
They've had a lot of turnover there, they're in
They're
a,
always invited, it's just they won't show up.
Were they invited there?
I would not imagine so.
I reached out to 2 different contacts, hadn't gotten a call back yet, but based on that recognition that they've had some turnover,
Yeah.
don't know,
That might
maybe
be
that
why.
phone's not being answered.
Yeah, they've been understaffed for about 3 months, so they're just now putting on more staff, I heard last week, so.
I'm just of the understanding that, you know, they're like, increase their capacity like significantly. I'm thinking, wow, that's fantastic. How does the city manager know that? How does the mayor know that? How do the members of council know that?
Just basically their outreach, asking if we had $5 or $6 million laying around, that we could contribute and participate in the expansion of their beds. They've got real property, they have an architect, they've got plans, they started their capital campaign. And it's just, there's contact through a handful of avenues, including, you know, their contact with the Norman Police Department and members of the Salvation Army and their participation in other service clubs. And so the conversation takes place. And they'd like to get up to 100 beds. Is the number kind of stuck in my mind as to what
Yeah,
their
but that's
expansion plan looks like?
That's like
Wish
2 or
list for
3 iterations out from
Yeah,
like,
that was a wish list
Well,
for them.
I think you should invite them for a meeting with you as city manager and understand where they're at, the Salvation Army, as far as execution of their design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's no fuzz on it. And then I think they should come back and brief the mayor and then the city council at whole, hey, this is where we're at.
We actually, that was instructed in finance committee last time.
That's great. How long ago was that?
Week.
That's great.
Yep, just waiting to get that return phone call and we'll book them.
And the other point to make with that is that the Salvation Army is a high barrier shelter versus.
I don't think so. I think you need to check your information. From what I understand, they're all inclusive. The only thing they provide an exception to is,
I think it's a high barrier shelter.
I don't think so.
By the definition of low barrier and high barrier.
I
that
think
the
they
council's had.
exclude one type of party, and I think the mayor or the lieutenant over there clarified that.
it also, they require identification, and that is considered a high barrier if you require identification.
Which we're struggling to get people anyway. If there are no more questions, I want to recognize Councilmember
Like,
Kingsbury.
I do.
We have one more.
So what's the definition of a low barrier shelter? There's no check at all?
There is a security check, but you don't have to have identification in order to, I'm gonna let Sean answer that question.
It means that you don't have a lot of programming around being able to access shelter. And so you can access shelter whether you actually choose to participate with extended care or not. And so when I say extended care, I mean wraparound services like case management, housing navigation, and there's no time limit. There's no requirements for you wanting to go into sobriety or ID or any of the things documentation wise that would stop you from accessing shelter.
And can I just add to the low barrier part, because it is in the revision, we don't have any green zones. It is something outside of the scope of City of Norman. So when we talk about low barrier, we mean there are some people who can't stay there because they have convictions. So not necessarily no barrier.
Right.
If that answers that, I'm gonna move to Councilmember Gansberry, because he's been waiting, and then Dixon.
My main thing that I just wanted to bring up also is the 19 pages that y'all supplied us and everything with all the actions and everything on there and everything like that. And reading through that, I want to thank everybody that served on your team to get us that document, first and foremost. And one thing that I felt very, it's a bad thing to read no matter what, because it's just a bad thing we deal with in our town and everything. But the fact that every line had something that, thanks to y'all, Norman was doing something to help with that. But on 99% of it, Cleveland County and more was doing nothing about that, So
In defense of that document, and since I'm the one who wrote all that, I will not say they are doing nothing. I will say I am not aware
yeah,
of what they are doing.
but the
I am not
majority
a
of it,
politician by standpoint, but
the majority of it, we did not know anything that they have done yet about it and everything
Are
like
they
that. But
participating in the continuum when you guys meet?
yes-ish.
Okay.
So I can get a hold of them when I need to. Sky,
Okay.
we have one person from the city of Moore that shows up several times a year. That they will help with the pit count. They are more engaged than they have been before. Are they highly engaged? No.
But my biggest thing is to thank the committee that you formed, to see this all the way through to a document that we can go by and everything like that, but also to be still engaged enough to start another program and another extension of this to still continue the conversation to try to get it better. And it's very much appreciated.
All right, Councilmember Dixon?
Do we see any impact, in the near future or homeless situation if HUD changes their policy for, the use of, funds for permanent supportive housing from 90% to 30%?
It is gonna be, that is one of my next points that I was gonna update you. I could talk for an hour and a half on what HUD is about to do, and I'm not going to do that. I would be happy to have a prolonged conversation with anybody in January about that. What they have issued is a total 180-degree ideological turn from the Housing First philosophy, which says if you can't get stabilized and have a place to live, it's really hard to get off drugs. If you are not stable enough and know where you're going to sleep tonight, treatment is a difficult thing to obtain. That's Housing First. Treatment First says, get clean, then we'll talk about getting you some housing. It's conditional. And it was the philosophy in the 90s and early 2000s, and HUD, it was not evidence-based, it didn't prove to work. They've gone to Housing First. It is evidence-based. It's worked the best of any systems that we've seen. It is not a silver bullet. It is not implemented in the ways that true Housing First is in most communities, so it is not as successful as it could be. But they wanted to change back to a Treatment First model in 60 days. They gave us literally a 60-day funding opportunity that should have run last July, and they announced it on November 14th, due on January 14th. My hair was on fire for 15 days trying to figure out what was going on, listening to all kinds of different things. Scott Martin was kind enough to get me and Dan and Mark Smith from Tulsa Housing Solutions in the room with some delegates so we could try to fight this at a congressional level. HUD withdrew that notice of funding opportunity, saying, we're gonna issue it again. So they could issue it tomorrow. We don't know. They pulled it because 21 states and 2 major national organizations took them to court to stop them from doing this, especially in this time frame. Yes. What it will essentially do is take 70% of the permanent supportive housing monies that is received by most communities and potentially divert it somewhere else.
I didn't vote for that,
So-
by the way. Presidential election, I did not vote.
What, do we know what percentage,
Or that
we're currently
person.
using for permanent supportive housing?
97% in our
97.
community.
But surely if they're flipping the 90 to 30, whatever, and making it be treatment first, there's surely hundreds of millions of dollars going into treatment stuff that we can send people to, right?
Oh, yeah, there are so many beds available. Like, Sean, you just pick up the phone and you get people on treatment, right?
$27 million shortfall in our mental
Yeah.
health department.
Yeah. I mean, literally, and if I, who, a privileged white person, with good insurance. When I had a kid that was in trauma, it took me 45 days to get her an appointment with a mental health provider. And that was 3 years ago. People who are struggling, it is 60, 90, 120 days out for an intake appointment.
And Your Honor, the fascinating thing about that concept on a nationwide basis, there may be a couple of communities that have capacity. And they may think, great, we'll use those dollars and just bring on board some more practitioners to meet that demand. It's, boy, in Oklahoma, I'm not aware of capacity in existence anywhere. And actually in Norman, the loss of capacity, the loss of contracts to the Virtue Center, who provided those services, a big contract loss to Red Rock Behavioral Health. Yeah, we have fewer services today than we did a year ago. So, and the entitlement CDBG dollars we receive as the city of Norman's a little over $1 million a year. And you think we're not gonna enter the clinic business with $700,000 a year.
Well, and the providers are out there also. I mean, thank goodness the nurse practitioners can get their psych certification. Previously, if you were just a family nurse practitioner, you could also do psych stuff with a little training, and now they do have to get certifications, I believe. But the MD psychs and the DO psychs are not. They're not out there.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say, as devastating as this is gonna be for rural communities, hang it up.
Yeah, it's gone.
I mean, like, it's gonna be bad for us, it's gonna be bad for Tulsa, it's gonna be bad for Oklahoma City, but this is going to destroy providers in rural communities.
So then we could potentially see.
You're going to see people
Influx
from
because you're
rural
gonna have to
are
move.
going to migrate to cities, yes.
Okay. Well, it's not a rosy outlook. But I appreciate the momentum we have and where we're trying to go, even though the mountain keeps getting taller.
I would like to just make one more point. Sean referenced the pit count. Yay, pit count. Last 10 days in January. We're gonna go outside at 4:30 in the morning. We're gonna meet at 4:30. We're gonna go about 4:45, 5 o'clock. Send people out to encampments and count the number of unsheltered homeless people in our community. I know Josh Hinkle's been there the last couple of years. I know I'm gonna see all of you at 4:30 over at the Development Center volunteering to come out for pit count. If you don't wanna volunteer at 4:30 in the morning, I have opportunities all day long.
And into the evening.
And into the evening. We're
Is
going
the
to
whole
count
day
in the
of
evening.
counting?
Yeah.
Yes. What we do is we send people out to known encampments, places where people have been spotted. We work with the police department and the Action Center in Kara and find out where people have been spotted in the previous about month. And we go specifically out to those places. We hit all the big public parks. The very first year I did it, we hit every public park. We don't do that anymore because if your public park is the size of this table, there's probably not a homeless person sleeping there. So we have judged the list for the last couple of years, and then we go where we know people are, and then places like Sutton Wilderness, we have groups that are there all day, and then we have groups that are at our day shelters and at the night shelter counting. So we have all kinds of opportunities. We'll send you out with good people. We don't ever send anybody out by themselves. We're very safety conscious and safety aware.
Councilmember.
Does couch surfing count as a point of contact for
No.
Norman?
Couch surfing is not considered homeless by HUD.
Gotcha.
Councilmember Bruce.
What that number, that pit number, it's a number that is very, very, very soft.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a soft
It's a
number,
huge
so
undercount.
I don't know how they take that into account, and is the federal, or you think the federal's changing that somehow in the future to do something else?
I couldn't tell you what is happening. I don't think HUD knows what's happening at HUD. Like, they have cut significant portions of their staff and nobody knows what's going on at HUD right now. So how that's gonna affect their algorithm for how they distribute money, I would not even begin to guess.
But every COC is required to participate.
Every
in it.
COC has to
So this is
participate.
gonna happen
If you
10,000 times.
If you
across
get
the country.
federal funding, you have to run a pit count.
It's effective for HUD for it to look like all the numbers are lower because that's less dollars they have to distribute. So I wouldn't imagine they're gonna find a system to make them accountable for more dollars.
And then, in that vein, evening. Could we have an RSVP sent out to us when it's time for a pit so we can put it on our calendar?
Save the
I've already
dates.
got it on my to-do list.
Whenever it comes through Stacy, we're pretty good about clicking that button and then it's on our
I'll
calendar.
send you calendar invites.
And I'll tell you from doing it for the last 4 years or so, the 4:30 in the morning shift has hot chocolate, so.
I do, if you come to the COC event, we have donuts. It's my little piece of comfort for all the people in the COC. Very rarely show up to a meeting without donuts or candy.
You always got something.
I always got something.
Well, thank you for all your time and research and for the community conversations that have been happening in the background. I'm encouraged, but it's gonna be a slog.
And everybody has my number. I think everybody has my cell phone number. If you have any questions, please text or call me. I'm always happy to have a conversation with the caveat that if you ask me about what's going on at HUD, I will tell you what I don't know, which is a lot.
All right. Moving on to item 3, discussion regarding possible amendments to the short-term rental ordinance. Recognize Assistant Attorney Jeannie Snyder to present.
You need a password apparently.
Big boy.
Need Bryce in here.
The Bryce is right.
Bryce is right.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying I'm Jeannie Snyder with the Assistant City Attorney, and there's Bryce in his password. Right now, you can all see it. I won't watch.
He knows exactly when to show up.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, did you bring your phone in? Okay, go.
How does he do it?
Do I just hit the button? You all know me. I'm the least one. Rick?
Hit escape.
I don't want me doing nothing.
Do you want me to help you, Jeannie?
Yes, ma'am. I'm hitting that. It's not coming up. Here comes my boss. He does everything. I'm the least likely in the group. Where did Robin go?
She had to leave,
Oh, pooey.
but I do know what she would ask, so.
Okay.
Brandon made her mad.
It happens.
Okay, so, it says on here amendments to the short-term rental ordinance, but basically I'm giving kind of a big, kind of just a general update on what's going on and then answer some questions on where you guys want to go with this. I first want to give just a quick background because only Mayor Holman was here during all the beginnings of this. And just so briefly, we started talking about this in late 2017. There was one property on the west side that the neighbors were unhappy about, and it was like our first kind of really known short-term rental, and it went from there. So you can see, I've been to Oversight. We first started talking about it in February of 18. I came back to another presentation, and we were talking about occupancy tax, and we estimated around 100 short-term rentals. I came back in March. Continuing discussion about should we have categories. During that time, I was gonna bring him in for show, but I didn't, my show and tell. I have 3 notebooks that stand this high. I've kept every minutes, every handwritten note. And just to see, and I went back through all those. So we discussed zoning districts and minimum distance between units and how many units should be on a street. All that was discussed. We continued through 2018. We had some drafts of it. We kept talking. 2018 was a big discussion year. We went into talking, should it be special or permitted use? And if the Center City Form-Based Code had questions about that. That's when I first came in contact with a monitoring service on who can find out, what short-term rentals are operating in your community. Then we go into 2019. Inspections were discussed. Should we notify neighbors? I did start contracting with, before we even had the ordinance, with host compliance. Mindy and I, what do you want to introduce? Everybody knows Janita Hatley, and Mindy's not here. We do operate as a team on managing the short-term rentals. A guy from Austin came up. He had short-term STR helpers. Then he sold to host compliance, and we contracted with them. They got gobbled up by Granicus. And it's just been snowballing with these monitoring companies and what kind of data is available. At that time, in August of 2019, there was 171. They were giving me that data at the time. It's what we had contracted with them for, just so we'd know where they were. Then in October of 19, we're still talking. Could an LLC or corporation own a short-term rental. We discussed that for quite a bit. And then we came back in November and they decided to, what about insurance? Should there be an inspection fee? Should there be a limited number to own? And so we really kept talking about that. By this time in March of 20, we have 206. And keep in mind, at that time, we were only monitoring them. We were not licensing them really. Then we got the ordinance together and it went to Planning Commission. We had to do some zoning ordinance changes to allow them as a permitted use in those zoning districts. And then finally, in July of 20, we got council approval on the current ordinance. And we started licensing in about August of 20. And so keep in mind, that was kind of COVID too, when we were right in the middle of trying to work on that. But during all that time, people were still, these short-term rentals were popping up. So that's just an overview, because we spent about 3 years or more working on this. So where are we now? We've got, this was as of last week, we have 429 identified licensed properties. Councilmember Grant wins the award. She's got 214 in hers. I went through the whole list, and this was just me going through the list, eyeballing property owners. I had no way to get it out. I found that there were 6 owners who had four short-term rentals. The current ordinance says if you want a 5th one, you've got to go to special use. Well, I did notice on a few, they might have, the Scott LLC, and then Genie LLC owns the next one, and then so it might be one owner, but the actual owner is a LLC or a corporation. So, but I've not got any more than that. I have discovered, and I didn't get into the weeds with it yet, there is an apartment complex that has more than 4. But it was in a multi-family unit that already, so it wasn't a single family home.
Did you need a special use?
Well, we didn't, it snuck by us, council member. I mean, they're not all owned by the same person. They're not, and they were also owned by an LLC. So there's about 9, but I don't believe they're all owned by the same person, but they really are.
Okay.
I don't really have problems with them other than they have difficulty keeping up with their paperwork. So Rick told me when I first started working here 25 years ago that we have experts that work for the city of Norman in all fields, engineers, lawyers, planners, everything. Well, we have map people, GIS people, So I finally started connecting with Joyce and Rick Hofstadter over in GIS, because Janita reminds me. And so they did, I can do this on our software program we have, but this is a better one. And so this gives you an overview of where they are right now. But I did go through mine, and I was able to, and I'll just kind of click through them. Where are they in Ward 1? Licensed short-term rentals. Here's Ward 2. Now, I could have, I was trying to keep it on one page of paper. If you wanted to in your ward, I can get you a more detailed map. And I have an example of that in a little bit. But then Ward 3 doesn't have very many. Ward 4 is overloaded with, that's the 214.
That's where all the action happens.
Yeah, lots of going on in Ward 4. Ward 5 has a smattering. In the beginning, I had a few more out in the rural area, but not anymore. Ward 6. And when I look, and if I'd have made it better so you would see the little cluster of dots, it would have gotten too much for me to copy.
In Ward 6.
And Ward 7 doesn't have very many, and neither does Ward 8. And so obviously it's clustered in Ward 4. I don't get a lot of complaints, and I'll talk about complaints in just a minute, but a lot of the complaints are the complaints about other types of rentals, This is where I wish that Robin had stayed.
I was just gonna say, I think just a theory about Ward 4 is that that's where people are more likely to have accessory dwelling units that already exist, or another house or something like that that's smaller, I think. So that might be a reason why there's a lot more in Ward 4, is there's a bunch of additional accessory buildings that people have on their properties already.
Yes.
That have been historically been apartments or something.
And I will say, the big party house that I've been talking about in another meeting was a whole house in a more pricey neighborhood.
Yeah.
So,
The one, yeah.
The majority of the short-term rentals are a single family. The majority are, they're not ADUs. I didn't bring that in here. We've got about 83% of our main structures, ADUs, there's around 5%. So there's not a lot that are, it's mainly single-family homes from what we're seeing. And I hate that Tyler had to go ahead and leave because I'm using her as one of my big examples. Robin is the president of the Old Silk Stockings neighborhood, and she's been in contact with me over the years and last year or two. How many do we have? And I was doing this very time-intensive way to try to track and just because I could find the map for just Old Silk Stockings. Well, then again, Janita reminds me that we have experts on our staff, and I got Joyce over in GIS to map it out so we could eyeball it. And so we could do this if we have boundaries. And this is the Old Silk Stocking boundaries, this neighborhood, and I think Robin would have brought some of this up. They're concerned, they don't want to have one whole street that has 5 or 6 on it. They do have property that has been bought and renovated for short-term rentals. There's pros and cons about that. They are improving the properties, they're cleaning up their properties, but yet their concern, and it could be a concern for other neighborhoods, she's just my example, is that then they're not families that are moving into these houses, they're turning into short-term rentals. So, but when you look at, there's 17 here, and I did go through those. As of the assessor's website, there are 9 of them that are owned by individuals, 6 were owned by LLCs, and 2 were owned by trust. So I used to just give her the list of the addresses. Well, this really gives a good, in a small area of 17, a good pretty bird's eye view of what's in that neighborhood.
and I'll just say 2 things about that neighborhood. There were 2 illegal ones that we got onto because they were spuds and it was not in their list of uses, and then we had that sneaky lawyer come through and try and get us to do it at the very tail end of an agenda without any prior conversation with either myself or the neighborhood. And to my knowledge, those are now long-term rentals,
Right.
as they were intended.
If you'll recognize when you cross the railroad tracks on
Acres.
and on this north side, there's some new apartment-y looking things. And they were sold after they were built and then went into, but before that, the guy had a PUD or spud, and he did not put as one of their permitted uses as a short-term rental. And so they're not allowed. We do have people, before they get a short-term rental, they better, or they find out they could be in a little bit of a mess, they contact Janita or somebody in planning, and they will look at the address and determine, or when they're asked for a license, are they allowed? They're allowed a lot of places, but if we had an issue out at the Vineyard Townhomes, I think they're called something else out there, but
It's a HOA.
yeah, they're just the ones that were the 0 lot line, not the bigger houses. And somebody bought the house, bought furnishings, got it ready to do a short-term rental, and realized it was a PUD or spud, and they were not an allowed use. And we told them no. I mean, they came and met with us. It was a former OU athlete who lived out of town who had a business and was anticipating the SEC. I don't know what they did with that property, haven't looked lately, but it was not allowed in that particular. There's a few other areas that they might not be allowed in, or if your HOA, your covenants don't allow them. So it's really important for people to make sure that their property, before they spend the money and buy it, if they're allowed, because Janita and the planning staff do all that.
And the second part of Robin's neighborhood is the perception that a whole street is being taken up, and I'll say the one with the cluster about 4 stars.
But that's Peters, Hubert, and Crawford.
Yes, and so just knowing who lives over there, the perception when there's all the on-street parking and it's a lot of activity, but they know those homes are not occupied the rest of the time.
Right,
So.
and so, we can do that with some time. It does take GIS. I can't do it in a day. Joyce needs some advanced time to get off her other stuff. But we could figure that out, but again, we're reminding everybody, we're dealing with over 400 now.
Yeah, and so I would just say since she's not here to speak, that was kind of Old Silk Stocking's ask was, could we geographically limit how many can be clustered in an area?
Yes, we could find the way if that's what the council wants, and we can discuss that, but that would, Sunita, as you're the one who helps check if they're going to, if they can be not licensed, that would take some time we'd have to, but I mean, if that's what the council wants, we'll figure out a way to do it. I'm sure there's areas in your
I mean,
ward
I'm
that's
gonna
got-
be a yes on geographic limitations just because of how many are clustered in Ward 4. And this is where the oldest affordable housing stock exists, and so there's a lot of competing between the housing market rate, affordable housing, visitors, footfall houses, it's competitive in the center
Some
of
places
town.
I've seen around the country, and I haven't done a big deep dive lately, but I can on this, is they may limit how many can be in, maybe Norman only wants to limit to 400. And then you can only have 400, or we're not gonna allow any more for so many, months. Whatever, the number does go up and down because we get calls every day as, oh, I don't wanna do that anymore. A lot of people think, oh, I got grandma's house, I'm gonna make some money on a short-term rental, and they realize it's a business and it takes time. So the numbers do kind of fluctuate a little bit. And some people have just gotten tired of dealing with it, and they end up either making them long-term or they're gonna sell them. We've seen kind of lately that's been happening. That people are like, I'm out. I'm just worrying about paying the taxes, and I gotta have it cleaned, and I've gotta have it ready, and all that. So it does fluctuate, but if that's something.
Yes, for me, I don't know about other council members. Councilmember Bruce?
Just refresh my memory on the definition of a short-term rental.
Oh, I did not bring that with me.
Less than 30 days.
Yes.
So does that mean I can live in it as my house, I can live in the rest of the, 11 months, and I can short-term rental 30 days?
Oh, it has to be less than 30 days to have to pay the occupancy tax of short-term rentals. So if that's a hotel, that's a definition of a hotel. If it's over 30 days, that's a long-term rental. So if you rent less than 30 days, you're a short-term rental, and then you're required to be licensed and pay the occupancy tax. I have people who rent as a short-term rental, they live there, and on the weekends, they will move them and their children to their mother's house. And then they rent out the short-term rental whenever they need, because that's how they're making some income. The majority of those don't. The majority don't have the property owner nobody I know of has a property owner living in the house while you're renting.
And I know you probably don't know this, but you might know this. So I'm just under the impression like 35%, 4% of the residents where people live, R1, R3, they're rentals. So it's like 35% of Norman, 40% Norman footprints, rentals. And I'm thinking, well, this is, I keep hearing that. I'm thinking, I can't.
I don't know that number. That could be correct, but I could.
These are short-term rentals for 30 days. It could be there's someone in there for the rest of the year, or no, it could be just ball game days.
It's rare. It's just ball game days. Sometimes people make enough that they just don't want to mess with it the rest of the year. But the majority, I think, people are renting them, trying to rent them out for all the time. But there are people, because some folks want them, the owners want to be here on game days, and they're in it themselves. And then they want to rent it other times.
The other thing that came up was the capping of a certain number. I think, well, I didn't even thought about that. So do they pay anything now for short-term rental? Is it what is it for the cost for a short-term rental permit?
Oh, I'll tell you here in just a sec.
Okay.
Right here.
So then it becomes a very hot commodity if you put a cap on it, right?
I know they didn't put the actual dollar amount. To get a license for a short-term rental in Norman, it's basically $200, and that includes an inspection. Janita's staff inspects every short-term rental at every renewal point every year, and she has 4 staff that do other stuff. Mindy wasn't able to be here. The tax revenue, some of that it jumped a little bit. I don't remember when did we increase to 8%?
23.
23, so that's when we started doing this, we were like, oh, we'll get about $30,000. you can see how that's increased, and this was just as of the end of June of '25, short-term rentals that we collected was about $550,000. There are some uncollected out there, and I've got some things in the works on another ways I'm thinking that we can do a better job of making sure, but that's for another day. But our licensing fees, this last full fiscal year, we brought in $77,400. The hotel occupancy tax, I noticed in the paper it was a little bit of different percentage on some other the guest tax discussion this week, but there's how that's where those fees go. We currently are with Decker Technologies. They charge us about $25,000 a year to do. They have a complaint. They help. They know where everything is. They send out letters to people. They do a big thing. And I told Matt, this guy, Mr. Davis, I would add this in here. He's a new director of customer service for Deckard as of September, and he's an OU grad from 2008, and his parents still live here. I said, I will mention you, Matt, because he was really excited that Norman was a part of the group, and he's gonna try to drop by. Maybe he'll be around on Christmas. But so I've got we talked Alabama football a couple of weeks ago. So I'm glad to have somebody, they have excellent customer service. Mindy, Janita and I, we email our guy. I know I email him 5 or 6 times a week with a question, and they're really, really good. But we could not do it without him, because we gotta know where these people are and collect the money. And we try. I asked Kyle, our customer service, you had asked me about the fees. He believes the average fee is anywhere from $200 to $350 across the country. I've talked to another company about another thing I'm trying to work on. It could be a little higher. I get complaints from the folks. I'm like, you rent that a night at $200. If you can't pay $200 for a fee, you don't need to be in business. So we could consider raising that.
And it has come up because Director Francisco had given us like a long sheet of permits and fees, and as a council, we haven't, as a body, given him enough feedback on that, but it would be my preference to raise the short-term rental.
And I mean, we have one property right now, I looked it up for the playoff game. It's an 8,000 square foot home in West Norman. It looks like a castle. And next week, they're getting $1,500 a night for the playoff game.
They're making money.
That's not every night, and that's not every house. The average, I think, is probably around $300, but we have some that are $125, 100, and oft times I've seen some for $99 or $110. So obviously things go up on game weekends and graduation, but it's not just the 6 weekends in Norman that these things are full. So there's the money part that Janita provided me with this. Her staff is busy. I mean, she monitors every application that comes in every day and then assigns an inspection to it. She maybe can give you a little more info, but the inspection is like, we've got to make sure there's fire, smoke alarms in every bedroom. The windows have to open, and every window has to open and close. You've got to have egress for fire. You've got to have whatever else. And her staff is excellent about going back and making special plans to meet people. But they do a good job. Just quickly, we do have an online complaint that people can go online and make complaints. We set up a designated phone number that they can call. That's online. And then if we get an email or phone number, I get it. Everything's directed to my office. They can contact the Action Center, and Janita, put your name up here. They can call me or Janita, and we will get on it. I will say, when I get to this next point, what I've noticed that I need to do some work on. Well, let me start with this. Sarah Kaplan did, again, we have experts. I am not this expert on housing, and Councilmember Grant wanted some information about it. I had no idea how to go do that, so I called Sarah Kaplan. And she put all this together, and I can have Kathy's office email you all this one page if you want, but how many housing sales do we have and what's the cost? So in 24, 36% were under 200,000. I thought this was, and then she's broken it down by wards too. So I think everybody would be interested in that, and I'll get that out to everybody. But I don't know where she got this. She was like, oh, I can get that from the assessor's website. And I said, good, because I don't know how to do that. But I thought it was really great information on just home sales.
Yep.
And, you know, but I've known people, people are spending, I can think of 2 houses this quick that spend almost, well, 3, it's over almost $700,000 and they're operating as short-term rentals. It's amazing to me, but it's surprising what people will spend or are spending. I think I'll just send you guys the whole PowerPoint. I did this kind of for fun, went through all the SEC cities. Everybody has some kind of short-term rental ordinance except Florida right now. Florida they've eliminated permitting. I didn't call anybody about why they did that. I've got a little more information on Tuscaloosa that I can get out if I need to. And then Mississippi State, Starkville's in the process of it. But I mean, Starkville is tiny. They probably don't have very many. I have talked to the person in Columbia, Missouri myself a year or 2 ago. I can't even remember my question. So I thought that was all SEC. Everybody has one. I mean, they're all dealing with it. I thought of this idea, and I need to redo our website, and I'll probably have to get Sarah Kaplan or somebody who knows how to do it better than me. But Major Barber told me about Galveston. He visits there a lot, and he said they've got over 4,000 short-term rentals. So I went to their webpage, and I think this might be something that we could put together, and they call it a good neighbor brochure that, you know, people who would go to our webpage could maybe have better information about this. Maybe somehow we do mailers to owners, however would be best to put it out. I thought that was kind of an interesting, it's just a little 2-page thing. So we maybe can cut off at the pass a little bit about this stuff, give them information. And Janita's working on a brochure or a flyer herself about for other things, but sanitation rules and just things like that might be good for everybody to have. Maybe we can print the brochure somehow, or they can print them off themselves. But I thought that was just an idea. I mean, Galveston's website gave me some good ideas. I'm going to need somebody who's a little more creative than me, but I'll be glad to do it. But just like quiet hours and where are you parking and places who they should call, I thought that would be, at least we'd be giving out the information. And so that was kind of it on what I had to present. I didn't really bring the ordinance in. There's a couple of things I kind of need to tweak myself. We've always said the applicant has to be the property owner. Well, we've got a lot of property managers, not a lot, but we have people who are doing property managers, and Oklahoma City gets an affidavit signed by the property owner that allows John Smith to be that. I kind of need to tweak that up a little bit. But for the most part, I don't see a lot of problems. We've had police respond, and there'll be a party there that somebody rented. I had a mother let high school kids go over there, and usually we get a hold of the owner and they've shut them down.
I had a question about fines and if we give them, how much are they, or is there a cap on fines?
I've only done 1 or 2. I mean, we have not filed a lot of charges because by the time we get to that, Janita, Mindy, and I have talked to the people. We've got the taxes paid up or whatever, but it would be $50 to $750 the penalty range. We've just never gotten that far on it because we've kind of jumped in there and got compliance. I've not had a lot of complaints come in. Sometimes it's people are like, I think I have one next door to me. Can you tell me if it's licensed? You know, they don't know, or what is going on over there? What is that? That's really what I get.
And I would say, on the website, and I'm like blanking because it's been a long day, but is there a requirement to tell the people around you that you are starting a short-term rental?
We had lots of discussion about that in the beginning, and what the council at the time decided on, they wanted at least a courtesy notice to go out. So the short-term rental owner is supposed to fill out the local contact, which they're all required to have. If you live in Texas, you still have to have somebody that can come over and take care of something. and they've got to distribute it to certain houses in the area, not the whole area, but it's like across the street, adjacent, behind you, just so your immediate neighbors know. Now, at the time, the council just wanted that to be a courtesy notice. It's not like they send it to me and I send it out. I mean, that could be something that we could beef up a little bit and make it, but it's on the website that they have to do it. We've got quite a few questions, FAQs on there. Everybody knows they're supposed to pay the occupancy tax, and then they act like they're so surprised. But I do believe that I need to do a revamp of the webpage.
Okay. I would like to require notice. I know because I have 214 of them currently, which is about almost half, that I would like to limit them geographically speaking, especially in the sensitive parts where we have that affordable housing stock, which is why I had asked about, are these market rate homes? And I know that like very far end, we're seeing like expensive homes being used for this, but it does seem like the obtainable housing is being used for this purpose.
There's a lot of, basic 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes that are being used for it. I will talk with Rick a little more and with you maybe more one-on-one on exactly the limit geographically. What do we do with the ones that are already licensed in there?
I imagine they would just roll off and not be renewed if they hit that number.
Because that's gonna cause a stir. I'm just saying, these people have purchased property or made it, but whatever y'all wanna do, I'll do it, but
I think it would be fair if we did limit them geographically speaking, that
for
as
like
the
on a
permits.
street or how many on a street or?
Within a ward, too. I know
and I
it's not
think
the same everywhere, but by street, maybe by neighborhood.
I need to I'll talk to Joyce and get maybe a little more detailed of at least Ward 4, so I can get a better bird's eye view of what Ward 4, where is the clusters or whatever. That's gonna take a little bit, and I do know other cities do that. There's a lot of litigation out there about short-term rentals too. Dallas tried to say you can't have any, and then there's lawsuits that have, taken over on that too. So I believe I'm correct. I'm sort of correct on this. In 2008-ish, a couple of guys in San Francisco, there was a big event or something, and there was like not enough hotel rooms or something. So they rented an air mattress in their apartment for like $1,000. And that's Airbnb, and the short-term rental market is probably about a $40 billion market now. And that's that's only in less than 20 years. So just since we've been involved in the last 5 to 6 years, it has exploded into a business but I will probably need a little more one-on-one with you
I'm happy to
on, exactly that, and I'll start with some other cities, but.
And like I said, I think if we do geographically limit it, letting those permits exist until they decide not to renew, and then, equalize.
I'll have to think about how exactly to do that. There's a lot of streets, and how do you do 4 here and 2 there? But it'll take some brain power that I'll have to get some help on.
Councilmember Bruce?
You mentioned also about a cap. Are you really thinking about, that might be an opportunity, think through about a cap as far as number, and then you'd raise the licensing limit?
The what?
The license,
The fee. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is that what?
Yeah, we can increase the fee.
Don't know how other wards feel. I don't mind them being, spread the wealth through other wards, but them being so concentrated in the core is problematic. But I don't necessarily see capping them at a number throughout the city being the answer to solve Ward 4's issues. So that's why I just throw out.
It's gonna take, we'll just have to dig a little deeper into that. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask, Daryl's not here, I think I can get the extra money. It didn't cost that much last year. Last year he had me.
She says, sure, you can.
Last year he had me had the monitoring companies, it wasn't in our package, so I had to pay for it. How many were rented on game days? I'm very curious about the playoff game next weekend. And I'll see if maybe I
What
can
kind of
squeeze
fees
it
they
out
do
of
and
them
stuff.
to see if they can tell me how many. I don't have a way to say, oh, we have, 412 were rented. They can do that. I'm gonna see if I can convince them to at least give me for 1 weekend that stat, because I'm very curious with OU, the playoff and graduation in 1 weekend, how many were rented?
Okay, and just thinking for the future, just really want to make sure I'm clear that we will require short-term rentals when they come online to notify the neighbors.
Yeah,
with-
they are required, but I don't have any mechanism
To
to
enforce.
make sure that they do it, so I'll figure that out too.
We have to modify the ordinance.
Yeah, we did, it would take some amendment of the ordinance, but
Is that, well, I was also thinking of part of the permitting process, it's like.
it is, they're required to do it, it's on the website, but it's, at the time, the council just wanted in words a courtesy notice, and they're required to do it, and do they do it all the time? Probably not, because I send it out and send them the form sometimes, so we maybe could tighten that up a little bit on.
And I do think that would be helpful, because if you think about neighborhoods like Old Silk Stocking where they're organized and they have a point person in their neighborhood, that person could be the one to reach out to the property owner and kind of head some of the issues that we get with parties and other things before it becomes a problem.
I don't get a lot, I personally don't get phone calls or charges in municipal court that there's been parties at these short-term rentals. Now that may happen.
Sometimes they don't call, but I do
But
get
sometimes they don't call,
pictures
but out of all the 430, I don't, but I don't live next door to one either, so.
And I'll say, when I did the Ward 4 quarterly meeting, it seemed like a lot of people didn't recognize there was a place where you could go complain. So some of that might be on the residents thinking they're just being overrun and there's nothing they can
Yeah,
do.
it's
except call
on
the
there,
council
there's a place to go to on the website and click on there and do it. Alrighty,
Okay.
I have a granddaughter doing a choir program, so I'm gonna step out.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
My little 7th grader.
Let's just run through it. We can be done. Cause it sounded like we're gonna have to research it more. Okay, and finally, we're gonna do right to counsel with City Attorney Rick Knighton to present.
And I'm gonna have Mike Figgins come up. He's gonna help us out tremendously with regard to this particular issue. He is the current Executive Director of Legal Aid Services of Oklahoma. And they've got right to counsel. They've handled those issues both in Oklahoma County. You can go have a seat. I'll stand here. Nice to meet you. He graciously, I talked to him for the first time yesterday and asked him if he could make it. He graciously agreed to come down and help talk through some of this. But what is the right to counsel in eviction cases in particular? And it's a state or local policy guaranteeing tenants access to an attorney when facing eviction. In Oklahoma, eviction occurs pretty quickly. Once that document is actually filed with the district court, I believe the hearing has to be set within 5 days. You have to appear. If you cannot establish, if you get evicted, obviously if judgment is awarded in favor of the plaintiff, usually you're given about a 48-hour time period that you actually have to move out, find someplace else to live. So that occurs pretty quickly. Right to counsel in eviction cases usually applies to low-income tenants, cases involving loss of housing, which in Oklahoma we call forcible entry and detainer. There may be some administrative or other court proceedings that are related to evictions that was applied to. Why does it matter? Again, eviction is pretty fast in Oklahoma. 7 to 14 days after filing, you're probably going to be looking at having to find someplace else to live. That will be difficult. I guarantee it will be difficult for me because I got a lot of stuff. But most tenants appear alone while landlords routinely have counsel. I tried to do all cases filed in Oklahoma in certain counties are on OSCN, and I can search them by date. And all those cases in Cleveland County would be forcible entry and detainers are filed as small claim actions. So I can go through and look at all the small claim actions and I can figure out which ones are forcible entry and detainer cases. The difficulty is for those cases, they do not upload the documents. They don't upload the petition. So I can't really look at that to tell you. I can look at it. I can look at the docket and tell you when it was filed, what the judgment was, but I can't tell you the whys. Why was this person asked to leave? Did it have to do with not paying rent? Did it have to do with damages? Did it have to do with something else along those lines? So it's really difficult to get really good statistics or a good handle on. I can tell you how many are filed. It also doesn't tell you, because Cleveland County also includes Noble, Moore, and South Oklahoma City, sometimes you can't tell where that particular case arises from. A lot of them I can recognize the apartment complex, I can Google search it and it'll tell me where it is. But not all of them are that way. A lot of them are filed as LLCs, and I have absolutely no idea where that LLC is located, where their rental was located. I was erring on the side of leaving those in when I was looking at that information, but it's really, really time intensive. I think I did 2 weeks, it took me 2 days to go through and figure out all that stuff, so that really wasn't that helpful. It probably would yield some decent information if you could drill down into those a little bit more, but you literally would have to take all those over to the district court and ask them to pull all those files and give you all those records to be able to figure that out. But the consequences of eviction include, one of them is homelessness, because again, a lot of those people, especially low income, if you don't have some place to live and you get evicted, you might find yourself homelessness. The other issues have to do with job loss and school instability. I know that school instability is one of the factors that legal aid looks at, and we'll talk a little bit about that issue in terms of Oklahoma City. A lot of times if you've got a kid that's going to school and you're evicted and you don't have a way to get that kid to school, there's going to be a lot of instability with regard to school. We used to do truancy fairly regularly. One of the things that we would talk about in terms of truancy violations is if you go down to Lexington and you were to talk to most of the people that are incarcerated there, one of the consistent things you're going to find is most of them were truant when they were school age, because that just tends to lead to, unfortunately, those types of issues. You heard earlier about long-term inability to rent due to court records. Again, Norman is unique in that we have 2 competing sort of populations for those low-income rentals. One are university students, the other one are people that may be homeless. And when you have that, and I've got a landlord, who am I gonna rent to? We're gonna rent to this person that's got 2 or 3 evictions on their record because they've had some difficulty, or these college students don't have any eviction on their record. They're gonna put 2 or 3 kids in there. More likely than not, they're gonna be paying their rent on time because they're splitting that up. More likely than not, you're gonna go with that group of college students, which lowers the amount of housing available at that level for people. So you have those 2 competing populations, which makes us a little bit unique in that respect. But again, having those evictions on your record definitely does not help with regard to moving forward in terms of renting housing in the future. And then again, that's an increased demand on local shelters and services along those lines when we have those people that get evicted because they, for whatever reason, they may be evicted for. Local programs typically include an eligibility issue. For example, you're gonna have, usually there's a income eligibility sort of criteria. For example, households under 100 to 100% of the federal poverty level, or however you wanted to sort of to create that, to fix that particular eligibility criteria. Scope, we talked a little bit about all stages. Very, like I said before, very important for those attorneys to get involved on the front end of those cases, because there's a lot of decisions that get made in the litigation process. You may agree to something early on that has a negative impact on you down the line, and maybe if you had counsel, you wouldn't have agreed to that, or you would have, come up with some sort of other idea, or at least you would have been given the consequences of, if you agree to this, this is what can potentially happen going down the line. And a lot of times, if you don't have that advice very early on, it could be problematic for you. Our court does have a mediation, which can be helpful with regard to getting some of those issues resolved. But again, if you really don't know what your rights are, it's really difficult for you to go into a mediation and be effective or effectively advocate for yourself if you don't know what your rights are, and attorneys can help with regard to those processes. And then, of course, you have the actual hearing, and then you potentially have some appeals where it's appropriate to have counsel during that entire process. Delivery model, this is one of the things that we were struggling a little bit with, and I did talk to Michael a little bit. The lady who is the director of legal aid for our county is Holly, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but Holly and I were on the board of, we were on the Cleveland County Executive Board for quite some time, so I know her fairly well. We did talk about the issue of municipal attorneys. Could you hire another attorney, put him in the city attorney's office, and have them do that type of work? The answer is no, because our charter specifically provides that one, attorneys in the city attorney's office only represent the city, and it prohibits our attorneys from having outside clients. The other issue that we talked about is if you were to represent an outside client, you probably would need insurance because, again, if somebody in our office did something, we just fire them. We're not, I mean, we don't have separate insurance because we're self-insured. But if you're gonna be representing somebody outside the city and they allege that you commit malpractice, that's gonna create a problem because arguably we could say, oh, they're outside the scope of their employment, we're not gonna cover them for that. So then you put that attorney out there on their own, having to potentially answer to that litigation as to whether or not they committed malpractice or not, and whether or not they owed that particular person any damages. So that creates difficulty when you talk about doing it from the perspective of a municipal staff attorney. One of the other things I did notice, and I did listen to, Mike did a podcast one time with a couple of other individuals, and one of the things that they did mention is OCU does have a tenants' rights clinic, and OCU is the law school that's downtown Oklahoma City. They do have a tenants' rights clinic. The difficulty is they will advise people from throughout the state, but they will only represent tenants in Oklahoma County. So even if you qualified under their criteria, if your case is in an Oklahoma County, they can't represent you. I did look online at OU. I don't think OU has a tenants' rights clinic, but I mean, if we thought about approaching them to see if they would be interested in doing something like that, who knows? But that is one of the things that I did notice that they have in Oklahoma County that we don't have. Legal Aid Services of Oklahoma did at one point in time have some ARPA funding. I know for Cleveland County, we had some ARPA funding that they were able to offer this service to tenants in the areas that they serve, which is Cleveland, Pottawatomie, McLean, Hughes, and Seminole County. So they serve that, our office that's based in Cleveland County serves those particular counties. Right to counsel, they have it in Oklahoma County, have a program in Tulsa County, but those are done by, they're done by zip code. And Mike told me the zip code's based on, one is based on truancy level, the other one is based on, I think you told me problematic landlords in those particular zip codes that they've identified. You were able to get some help in Oklahoma City, and Tulsa's the same, it's done by zip code. But of course, that depends upon the funding mechanism, and whether or not those funds are available for that type of service. And then Michael's, like I said, he's the executive director for Legal Aid Services of Oklahoma and has a lot of knowledge and expertise with regard to this issue. So I am going to let him talk to you a little bit about his perspective with regard to this issue, because when Jeannie was talking earlier about, I said a long time ago, we have all kinds of experts. He's definitely a person I would go to ask the questions about this issue, because he definitely has a lot more experience than I do, and some insight that can be helpful with regard to you guys making this decision as to whether or not you think this is appropriate or which way we need to head. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Rick. And I'll try to be brief out of respect of your time. So, right to counsel, evictions. Think of a bathtub. Plug is in the drain, the faucet's on. It's running. Eventually it overflows. So you think, oh, I better get a bucket, a second bucket, a third bucket. It's like, oh, what am I gonna do? That's evictions. It's flowing over the tub. Somebody needs to turn the faucet off. If not off, at least to a trickle. And that way you can control and kind of have a handle what's going on. In this county, you're dealing with 4,000 evictions a year, eviction filings. That's 4,000 families who are living in affordable homes, more than likely, who have lost their homes. And it's pretty constant. It's around, 300-400 every month. That's a significant impact on those folks. And you heard earlier about services that they need. I mean, it's profound. As Rick says, there's a scarlet E. So yeah, they can get housing, but it's not housing you and I would want to live in. And it's probably not healthy for their children, but that's what they have to do. They have to come up with deposits. It's a big challenge. And it's depressing. and impacts people mentally as well. So, you know, you're forced out of your home, and it's not because you're a bad tenant. It's not always because you don't have the rent. We see clients all the time who have the rent. They offered it to the spouse, but the husband didn't know. Or they offered it to them and they said, well, we don't want it anymore because you said something, so we don't want you here anymore. We don't like you. So there's lots of reasons why people get evicted have nothing to do with not being able to pay the money. And during an eviction, you lose your stuff. Stuff doesn't get moved. As Rick says, school's an issue. Absenteeism is a big problem in Tulsa, growing problem in Oklahoma City. And if the kids aren't in school, the school is not getting Title I money. And homelessness, you heard about that today. So it affects employment, it affects credit, and it's just, nothing good comes from it. So what legal aid does is we try best we can to go upstream. As Rick said, the earlier we get people, the better. All too often, oh, I spent my rent money because I had to fix my car. I had to get to work. And, you know, I got 2 weeks now, I'll get the rent money. Well, inevitably 2 weeks is there and they're getting the notice. If they get a hold of legal aid at that juncture, we can talk to the landlord. And you may think, oh, landlords must hate legal aid. Landlords love legal aid. Why? Because we will work out a deal with the landlord early where the landlord doesn't have to involve the landlord's attorney. The landlord doesn't have to file anything in court. The landlord doesn't have to worry about vacancy, cleaning things up, re-renting. That's a big burden. So we say, hey, he spent the money on the car. He'll make it up in the next 2 months. He'll pay you extra. Work out a payment agreement. Everybody signs it. Everybody's happy. And it helps to have the lawyer by your side. It makes a difference. Even when there's another lawyer, and as Rick said, landlords have lawyers. Debt collectors have lawyers. Batterers have lawyers. The people who I represent don't, unless it's legal aid. So the landlords like it. We try to go upstream, and we're successful. We did an evaluation when we were going great guns there in Oklahoma City with the zip codes. We had professional people come in and evaluate everything we did. 95% of the time, we achieved the goals of the client. And it's different when you have an attorney. You're treated different. The court treats you different. The landlord treats you different. You're given respect that you wouldn't have otherwise. They listen and they're agreeable because they know if it gets messy, it's going to cost a landlord a lot of money. And so they want to resolve things. Let's work things out. Let's make a deal. And that's what we do. And sometimes you can't make a deal. I mean, there's people getting evicted for discriminatory reasons. And we don't stand for that. And if we have to file complaints and we have to bring litigation, we will. But the bottom line is once you get that reputation, it's like, oh, well, geez, legal aid's representing this tenant. We better make a deal. And that's what they do. And so still, though, once we get somebody out of the eviction, we're not done because there's still the biggest problem, poverty, or some kind of aspect of poverty is why they couldn't pay the rent or having a hard time. So we do everything we can to increase their income. If they're disabled, we get them on disability. If they're unemployed, we get them on unemployment. So many of our clients have never filed taxes in 2-3 years. We get them earned income tax credits. The average earned income tax credit for a family in Oklahoma is almost $3,000. We have settled evictions just by going in, showing the landlord, here's the claim from the IRS, it's coming in the next 2 weeks, and they'll say, oh, okay, well, if the money's coming, yeah, I can wait. And so we do all these things to get more money into the house. You'd be surprised how many people work and don't get paid. We can collect unpaid wages. There's unpaid child support, lots of revenue sources. Then we look on the other side. There's the money going out. If you've been incarcerated, you have fines and fees. And everybody has them. And the thinking is, oh, if I don't pay those fines and fees, they'll put me back in jail. So I have to choose, pay the fines and fees or pay my rent. Well, I'm going to have to pay those fines and fees. Legal aid gets those waived. They just go away. They're waived. But you have to have an attorney. You have to go to court. But we get that all done. And the next thing you know, they have more money. They have significantly less debt. And they're better off. And we work with them in capacities of, make sure they're getting SNAP, making sure they're getting health insurance. And we stick with them. We check on them. And that way, they're never going to face eviction, more than likely. And they're going to be somebody who's going to be a better tenant as well. So it's easy to fix. And, the 4,000 people losing their homes every year, maybe that doesn't have to be. And if it's not, that's a lot less pressure on the homeless services you talked about, because there'll be less people and there'll be more people housed, and they'll be housed in a way that they can maintain that.
Any questions? Councilmember Gandisberry?
Said with you mostly dealing with Oklahoma City area and everything, like metro type area and everything like that, does your fee to, what you operate on obviously and everything to help these people, where does your funding structure come from the most in it?
Where does it come from? Well, in
Yeah.
the past, it come from grants that don't exist anymore, the ARPAs and the ERAPs. And I mean, it's called right to counsel. It doesn't, right to counsel implies, hey, I have a right. You owe me an attorney. And I don't know that that's reasonable. But certainly right now, there's almost no or very little access to an attorney in this county. If there was significantly more than there is now, it may not be a right, but certainly a lot more, if not all of those 4,000 people have access to legal services. And what we charge is one full-time attorney. I mean, full-time, it's all they do is stop the evictions and get these people rehabilitated, is $100,000. So if you did, if you had 5 and a couple paralegals, that'd be about $600,000. And if you had 5 attorneys who did nothing but evictions, they would do approximately 5 a week times 5 is 25. I mean, you're getting up to 100, 200 a month. And again, the numbers I'm looking at, the 300-400, those are filings. They don't all end up in evictions. You're making a big dent. You're making a big impact.
Does Oklahoma City Council or anything like that, do they give any money or donate to legal aid themselves there to help supplement some of your?
Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
They did. I mean, when we had the ERAP, there was millions. And now in Tulsa, for example, the foundations are paying most of the freight for that. Yeah. But the city is
the city themselves, though, do not
yeah.
either of those two.
Well, and just to clarify that, and what we talked a little bit about, for that program, again, Cleveland County or our legal aid for our area did have that service before, paid for by ARPA fundings. They had 2 attorneys that did that at about $100,000 apiece. We also talked about 1 legal assistant. So if you had the 2 attorneys and the 1 legal assistant, and this number comes from Chat, the legal assistant number comes from ChatGPT about what the average cost of a legal assistant in this area is. That number is about $265 a year. Funding models, again, you could take it, if you found the money in the general fund, you could make that appropriate, you could make that expended from the general fund. I don't think we have any ARPA funds left over, or we don't have, or there isn't any other federal funds available, like Mike was saying, when they're available. Some of it comes from philanthropy. We did talk a little bit about the transient guest room tax, but that's an issue that you'd have to submit to the voters, because the way that is structured right now, that revenue has to be for tourism purposes. So that would be, we've talked about raising it. One of the things that we talked about is the majority of council interested in putting something on there that also talked about allocating some of that funding with regard to legal assistance with regard to people that are being evicted. But those are sort of the thought processes with regard to funding models. And there could be other potential funding sources out there. I just don't know about at this particular moment.
I did have a question. Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for, is this, the needs are for the county or for Norman?
When I talked to Holly, it was more when she had an attorney that did this work for her area, and I'm going to assume it was for all of those counties. Now, when I talked to Mike a little bit, because we were talking about the thought process of, okay, how do you pull out just the Norman people? But remember, in Oklahoma and Tulsa County, it's based on zip code. So one of the ways, I mean, there is a mechanism on their website for you to apply for that type of assistance. But they also will go over to the courthouse during those small claims dockets, set up a table that has that information. You would come and inquire, They would check to see whether or not you're in that zip code. If you're not in the zip code, sorry, we can't help you. If you are in the zip code, yes, we can. So that would be a similar mechanism, I would think, that if we were to do something like that, it would be probably run the same way. I know Judge Childers has her small claim docket every Friday. And, you know, I'm looking at, when I looked at that 2-week time period, and I just started the first business day in January of 2025, there are a couple of days where there weren't that many filed. There are a number of days where there were 30 or 40 filed. And like I said, when I look at the disposition dates, a lot of the disposition dates were the same day. So all those people were over there at the same time, you know, getting their cases either adjudicated. A lot of times, unfortunately, what'll happen is you'll be late on your rent. The first thing your landlord will do is go file the FED. He knows you're gonna pay it late, but yet you've gotta show up to court. He wants you to pay the filing fee along with whatever you're in arrears for. You go to court, you pay him, it gets dismissed. But again, you now have that, you've created that record for this person going forward where anybody can pull your name up on OSCN and it's gonna tell me this how many times you've had that forcible entry and detainer filed against you. And again, part of it is probably education. I know Daryl and I did talk about, you know, even if you didn't necessarily do the full-blown program, at a minimum, could we put something on our website to where if people had questions, and I know the city clerk's office, their action line probably does get some inquiries. I know every once in a while, our office will get an inquiry. It'd be helpful if we knew what those resources were, so we could, even if we weren't providing the program, we could say no, but this is where you can call for somebody to help you with those issues.
I was initially thinking 100K because it was just one lawyer, and I was just thinking for Norman that could be like a pilot, as it were. I was talking to Assistant City Manager Stevenson and Parks Director Olson earlier, and it sounded like Anthony Francisco was telling us that state statutes say that the guest room tax actually has to be for tourism and whatnot, and so even if we did change our ordinance, there would be a conflict.
I'd have to go look at that. That's something I'd have to look at.
Question mark, I guess we could look at that. The other thought was that we could put it in the social and voluntary services, you know how we do that funding, and then just allocate from the general fund to this particular use to legal aid. So that was another thought about how we could kind of pay for one lawyer who's dedicated to Norman issues, so that folks can not be fast-tracked into homelessness.
And I think that's an issue we sit down with Mike and Holly and sort of talk about their thought process on that issue.
Yeah, I think your idea of a pilot's a good idea. That way we come back and say, this is what we've done with one, and it's, you know, if it's like I think it's gonna be, you may say, wow, well, that's great.
Okay, Councilmember Gainsbury.
With your expertise and everything, and hearing about a pilot of possibly one attorney and everything like that, realistically, you know, when you have one, you know, you mentioned 1, 2, 5 attorneys working on them, you know, and that's all they're doing. How many cases a week or a month can one attorney handle successfully, you know, at that 95% rate, and give it each person their full, you know, time and attention?
It'll depend on the level of experience, but generally speaking, it's gonna be 5 to 7. We're talking about contested evictions a week that they could do. And so that's, you know, 40, 50 a month. I mean, that's an impact. And certainly we'll have to probably come up with some priorities, decide who we help and maybe who we don't help if we're busy. And those priorities are probably involve people who are, you know, obviously facing eviction or have some kind of a reason or a defense, and we can really help them.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And we did, there's a little bit, when I was looking at this earlier, there were things like, you could have it where your priority were families with children, or your priorities were seniors.
Disabled person.
Yeah, or people in those categories.
And I think seniors is a great one, because we just heard earlier that it was basically first time older folks facing homelessness. And most of it is the rent and the bills. So Councilmember Bruce.
Somebody talked about augmenting, asking OU to have a similar program that they have in the city,
Yes.
and they came back with a formal response, said no.
We haven't asked them.
Oh.
When I talked to Mike this afternoon or this morning, and then I was looking for information about him to put on this PowerPoint, I came across a podcast that he had done with the Bar Association, actually with John Morris, who used to be the executive director of the Oklahoma Bar Association, and he would do podcasts about different issues, and one of them was about the housing issue, specifically about this issue, is when I listened to that podcast, I heard somebody mention the fact that OCU had a program. I was like, that's interesting. I know OU has a legal clinic, and I know OU's legal clinic does do some civil cases. I know the lady who's the director of the OU legal clinic. I just haven't, just because that came to me today, I didn't have time to contact her to sort of talk through this issue with her, but I don't have a problem doing that.
The OCU clinic, like even the OU clinic, if there was one, it's a teaching tool. So it's me as an attorney with, 2 or 3 students telling them how to do things. And they're not gonna have the capacity to look beyond the eviction, and they're really not gonna have the capacity to do any appeals. Again, because it's instruction, and it's good instruction, they do a good job, but they're limited as to their capacity, what they can do.
I understand. I'm just looking for, 4,000 is a heck of a lot. I'm looking at your expertise, and I'm thinking if there's an agreement already with OU, you'd share some of that knowledge with the students.
Sure.
And that's
Sure could.
4,000 for the county. We're probably thinking maybe a couple hundred a month for Norman.
If I'm
It's hard to tell.
remembering, and
The
remembering,
attorney's only gonna be able to handle
if I'm
20,
well, if I'm
28 to
remembering,
30 a month, period.
yeah, if I remember the information I put together, and it's the first 2 weeks in January of this year. And again, we're probably erring a little bit on the high side because the ones I had questions about I left in. I think that number was 174. Well, that's a 2-week time period.
Well, I'm interested in exploring a pilot for us. And it could involve the OU Legal Clinic. I understand the limitations. But given what we're seeing currently in Norman, I think it would be pretty good investment. I think I was reading, it was Oklahoma Watch or Oklahoma Policy Institute said for every dollar you spend on helping people with the eviction process, you're saving about $7.27 elsewhere. So I think it would be beneficial, and also seeing the fastest growing segment of the population is seniors. But we also, I mean, back when I was an OU student and I was doing my journalism assignment, I went to an End Homelessness Coalition 2015 meeting. That was like a public meeting you could sit in on. And I was hearing about a family living in a car out at Lake Thunderbird. And I know that hasn't really changed. Like, it's 2025, and there are probably other families that are in a similar position. So, if not more, because also Oklahoma Watch had an article that came out that said the SNAP freeze during the government shutdown has strained people. Heidi, you want to say something?
Yes, 2 things. Legal aid was a game changer during COVID. And when the eviction moratorium hit, and then after that happened, and they set up a table at Cleveland County Courthouse, and we're just helping people, and it was a huge, a pound of prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So it stops homelessness. So from my perspective, yay. Also, that Oklahoma Watch article was excellent. And one of the things that they did is they provided leaflets to the people who were the county sheriffs who were going out and serving the evictions, that they provided them with a slip of paper that they could put in that gave contact information, like you're being evicted, here's who you can call for help. And that may be just a small little thing, but to be able to get the word out directly to people who are experiencing homelessness for a marginally low sum of money. But the problem then becomes, who's gonna answer the phone?
Right. Are there any other questions or thoughts from council? I see you shaking your head. You're
Move
forward.
forward. I like the pilot idea.
Yeah.
Trying it out. figuring out how we can get something going.
Yeah, I would love to bring this back to Oversight and we can put some more info together and explore what a pilot would entail, what it would cover, who might be our partners, and how we'll do funding. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned and thank you everybody for